So if you want to build like a $1 billion empire, right? You study Tony Robbins' business strategies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his corporate turnarounds, you look at his stadium level energy, his marketing mechanics, all of that. But if you actually sit down and ask the man himself how he navigates that level of extreme pressure,
He's not going to pull out a spreadsheet.
no, he doesn't talk about market dominance at all. He talks about taking this literal 90-second physiological sledgehammer to his own fear. And he talks about this deeply personal, almost architectural view of faith. So welcome to the deep dive.
It's a massive pivot, honestly, from what we usually expect from him. And I mean, that's exactly what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Right, today we're pointing our lens at a set of ideas that might seem a bit unexpected for a business guru. We're looking at footage from a really candid interview where the creator George Janko sits down with Tony Robbins.
And Janko doesn't ask him how to optimize a company, which is what everyone else asks.
Yeah, he goes straight for the spiritual jugular. He asks Robbins about his belief system, his concept of the divine, and really how he constructs the internal scaffolding that supports all that crazy external success.
Which is such a valuable inquiry, because we're so accustomed to just seeing the external machinery.
Right, the flashy stuff.
Exactly. We see the wealth, the reach, the sheer volume of his interventions. But what Janko captures here is essentially the schematic of his internal combustion engine.
Oh, I like that, the engine.
Yeah, because the external aerodynamic chassis, the communication skills, the business tactics, those don't actually move the vehicle without a reliable, explosive internal process.
And what we find in the interview is that his combustion process is entirely fueled by this highly specific, very rigorous framework of faith.
But wait, before you, meaning the listener, hear the word faith and think this is going to be some dry theological lecture, we should probably stop you right there.
Yeah, please don't turn it off. Because whether you are deeply religious or strictly agnostic or somewhere entirely in between, the mechanics we are unpacking today are just intensely relevant to you.
Completely. Because if you strip away the dogma, what Robbins is actually outlining is a blueprint for radical resilience.
Right.
He is basically reverse engineering how a human being maintains an internal equilibrium when the external world is inevitably just spinning out of control.
Because the external world will spin out of control. I mean, that is the single guarantee of the human experience.
Is that the truth?
Yeah. So the mission today is to take these massive, abstract, philosophical concepts, faith, purpose, divine connection, and really translate them into actionable everyday mechanics.
And we should probably start with faith itself, right? Because Robbins completely scraps the traditional kind of cultural definition of the word.
He really does. He argues that it's not a passive gift.
No, not at all.
It's not like a lottery ticket where some people are lucky enough to be born with a sense of peace and others just aren't. He defines it as a biological and psychological necessity.
He is quite emphatic about this in the footage, too. He explicitly states that you don't have to build faith out of thin air.
Right.
His premise is that every single human being is born with it, and we literally cannot function without it. You had faith the sun was going to rise today.
You have faith that when you step on the brakes, your car will actually stop.
Exactly. It is an innate mechanism of trust.
But here's the major pivot.
Yeah.
He describes it functionally as a muscle.
Yes. The muscle analogy is huge here.
Yeah, he says, and I'm quoting the interview here, faith is a muscle, and the more you use a muscle, the stronger it gets.
Which makes sense.
Right. And then he says, faith unused does not grow, it shrinks. Courage unused does not grow, it shrinks. Passion unexpressed does not grow, it shrinks.
The paradigm shift there is just profound. By categorizing faith, courage, and passion as musculature, he takes faith out of the realm of being like you either have it or you don't, and drops it squarely into the realm of doing.
Let's unpack the biology of that, though, because I don't want this to just sound like, a cheap motivational poster.
Fair enough.
What does it actually mean to treat an abstract concept like a muscle?
Well, think about actual muscular hypertrophy. You don't get stronger by just possessing muscles on your body. You get stronger through the application of tension and resistance.
You have to lift heavy things.
Exactly. When you lift a heavy weight, you are literally creating microscopic tears in the muscle fibers.
Oh, right.
And the body responds to that trauma, that friction, by repairing the fibers to be thicker and more resilient than they were before. It adapts to the load.
So Robbins is arguing that faith and courage require that exact same mechanical process.
Yes, they require tension. They require you to be placed in a state of uncertainty or fear and for you to actively exert trust against that fear.
And the terrifying flip side of that is the reality of atrophy. I mean, he specifically uses the word shrinks.
Yeah, which is a scary thought.
It is. If you break your leg, right, and it sits in a cast for 8 weeks, completely immobilized, when the doctor finally saws that cast off, your calf muscle is visibly smaller.
Oh yeah, it's just gone.
It was physically deteriorated simply from a lack of mechanical tension.
And this is where the psychological implications get staggering, because if we extrapolate that biological reality to the emotional realm, it completely reframes how we view modern anxiety.
How so?
Well, if courage and passion physically, or neurologically, I should say, shrink when they are unexpressed, then perhaps the apathy, the chronic fear, the ambient dread so many people feel aren't malicious external forces that just randomly attack us.
Wait, hold on. Say that again. You're saying the fear isn't an attacking force.
What if it's not? What if the overwhelming anxiety is simply the natural psychological void left behind by a neglected workout routine for the human spirit?
Oh.
Right. If you don't subject your courage muscle to daily tension, the space it used to occupy in your psyche is naturally filled by fear. The fear didn't necessarily invade your life. Your courage just atrophied to the point where it can no longer support the standard weight of daily existence.
That is a staggering way to look at it. But I have to push back here a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for anyone listening who is currently in the middle of... If we are born with this innate faith muscle, why does it feel completely inaccessible when a sudden tragedy hits?
That's a great question.
Right, like someone loses their job or they get terrifying medical diagnosis and they don't feel some dormant reservoir of courage. They just feel completely broken. If it's innate, why does it vanish when we need it most?
It's a completely valid challenge, but staying within the muscle anatomy provides the exact answer to that.
Okay, lay it on me.
Think about the atrophy analogy again. Imagine you have been bedridden for 3 years. You still have leg muscles. You were born with them. They are anatomically attached to your skeleton.
All right.
But if the fire alarm suddenly goes off and you are forced to leap out of bed and sprint down a flight of stairs, which is, the equivalent of a sudden life tragedy, your legs are going to immediately collapse beneath you.
Oh, I see.
Not because the muscles don't exist, but because they haven't been subjected to a load in 3 years. They are completely unconditioned for a sudden, maximal effort.
Ah, okay. So the failure in the crisis isn't about the crisis itself. It's about the lack of conditioning leading up to it. It's about the micro movements.
Precisely. When an individual experiences a total collapse of resilience during a hard time, we have to look backward at the daily micro-avoidances.
Like what counts as a micro avoidance?
Well, did you avoid speaking up in a meeting because you were afraid of looking foolish?
Oh, yeah, people do that all the time.
Right. Or did you put off a difficult conversation with your partner because it would cause temporary friction? Did you talk yourself out of taking a small creative risk?
So each of those is like skipping leg day.
Exactly. Each of those moments was an opportunity to put a tiny micro tear in the courage muscle. It was a missed repetition in the gym. And over 5, 10, or 20 years, those seemingly insignificant, comfortable avoidances actively degrade your capacity. So when the heavy weight of real tragedy drops on you, the structural integrity just isn't there to hold it.
If you are listening to this right now, I want you to mentally audit your last week. Not your whole life, just the last 7 days.
It's a tough exercise.
It is, but do it. When was the last time you actively, intentionally put your courage under tension? When did you last flex your faith, however you choose to define that word, by stepping into a situation where the outcome wasn't guaranteed?
Are you maintaining that internal musculature? Or is your daily routine currently engineered to be so frictionless and comfortable that your resilience is just quietly shrinking by default?
It is a deeply uncomfortable audit, for sure. Because if we accept this premise that faith and courage are muscles demanding daily resistance, the next immediate question is structural.
Right, because a muscle cannot flex in a vacuum.
Exactly. It has to be anchored to a bone. It has to pull against something solid. So what is the anchor for this faith? What are we connecting to?
And this naturally brings us to a specific story in the footage that answers that exact question of anchorage.
Yeah, it's a deeply personal recount of a time Robbins sought a completely unfiltered, direct connection to figure out what his anchor actually was. Let's look at what happened in Fiji.
Yes, the Fiji epiphany.
Ah.
Robbins describes being at his resort with his wife, and he was doing some heavy contemplating about his son.
Right, his son was quite young at the time, I think.
Yeah, and he was specifically wrestling with how to guide his son spiritually without accidentally brainwashing him with his own paternal biases.
Right, he literally says, I'm not going to influence my son by talking about this. And his solution is pretty extreme.
To say the least.
He decides he needs to consume the entire Bible from cover to cover. But he doesn't just, like, read a chapter a night before bed. He decides to do it in 4 or 5 days, and he pairs it with a physical fast.
The mechanics of that choice are fascinating. Fasting combined with a rapid, full-text immersion into one of the most dense, historically complex, and interpreted texts in human civilization.
Yeah, why do the fasting part, though?
Well, he is intentionally creating a state of sensory deprivation regarding his physical body. He's denying himself food while completely flooding his cognitive and spiritual centers.
Oh, so it's a forced overload.
Exactly. Historically, from ancient monastics to indigenous visionaries, this deliberate physical depletion is utilized to strip away the background noise of the ego. He wanted to encounter the raw data of the text without the comfortable buffers of modern life.
He wanted the raw feed.
He did.
And after he finishes this intense, sleep-deprived, fasted immersion, he walks up to his son. And the son had apparently been quoting standard, kind of culturally accepted interpretations of Scripture to him.
Right.
And Robbins asks him a single, incredibly disruptive question. He says, "Do you think God grows?"
That specific question is a theological earthquake. We really need to pause on it.
Let's do it.
Because for centuries, the dominant Western philosophical and theological model, which is heavily influenced by Aristotle's unmoved mover concept, has insisted on a static, entirely unyielding, perfect, and unchanging divine entity.
Right, like God is a monolith.
Exactly. The concept is that the divine is already complete, therefore change is impossible, because change implies moving from a state of imperfection to perfection.
And the son reacts exactly how you'd expect a kid to react. He's confused. He asks if his dad is running some sort of psychological trick on him.
Because asking, do you think God grows, implies evolution.
It totally shatters the idea of a static, unblinking universe and introduces this terrifying but potentially beautiful idea of a highly dynamic, relational, and evolving connection with the divine. It implies the relationship is alive.
Exactly. And Robbins quickly clarifies to his son that it's not a trick question. He explains his core anxiety. He was terrified that his son's experience of God was entirely mediated.
Mediated meaning secondhand.
Right. It was secondhand. The son was experiencing the divine through a minister or through a specific cultural lens.
Which is how most people experience it, honestly.
True. Now, Robbins is quick to note that ministers and guides are beautiful things, but his underlying critique is about the danger of relying completely on a proxy.
Right.
He wanted his son to have a primary, direct encounter, to read the text himself, feel the friction of it, and see what emerged, rather than just downloading someone else's prepackaged conclusions.
He drops an analogy in the interview that I think is, honestly, the most powerful conceptual anchor of the whole conversation.
The signature analogy?
Yes. He tells his son, "I wish everybody's experience of God, quite frankly, was as unique as your signature." So instead of fighting over, you have to have my signature, everybody wanted to have their own individual signature, their own individual connection.
The signature metaphor is brilliant. Let's dissect what a signature actually functions as in society.
Okay, let's do it.
A signature is legally binding. It is the ultimate personal validator. It marks your authentic consent, your identity, your unique neuromotor pattern on a piece of paper.
You literally can't fake it perfectly.
Exactly. Most importantly, by definition, it cannot be flawlessly replicated by another human being.
If you try to copy someone else's signature, it's literally forgery. It's a crime.
Precisely. Applying that legal and biological reality to spirituality completely democratizes the divine experience. He is actively rejecting a mass-produced, factory-line version of faith where every single person is forced to trace over the exact same theological lines.
Wow.
He is arguing that true spiritual anchorage must be bespoke. It must be forged by your own hand.
Let me put it this way for anyone listening right now. Relying entirely on someone else's spiritual filter, whether it's your childhood pastor or a modern wellness guru, a favorite author, or even just your own parents. It's the equivalent of reading a highly detailed, beautifully written review of a complex symphony.
Oh, I like this.
Right. You memorize the review. You can quote the reviewer's feelings about the crescendo. You argue with other people on the internet about how the symphony makes you feel. But you have never actually put on a pair of headphones and listened to the music yourself.
You possess the vocabulary, but you completely lack the visceral frequency. You haven't felt the sound waves hit your own eardrums. You have inherited knowledge, but you are entirely devoid of the signature experience.
Exactly. And that is the challenge staring you in the face right now as you listen to this. Look at the core foundational beliefs you operate on every single day.
The really deep ones.
Yeah. The beliefs about how the universe works, about your ultimate potential, about what happens when you fail, or about your spirituality, are those beliefs genuinely your own signature?
Did you bleed for them?
Right. Did you forge them in the fire of your own direct questioning and friction?
Mm.
Or, if you strip away the ego for a second, are they just blurry photocopies of your parents' assumptions that you inherited and never bothered to critically rewrite?
It requires immense psychological vulnerability to admit that your current operating system might actually be a forgery of your culture's beliefs.
It really
But
does.
realizing you are operating on a forgery is the mandatory first step to finally picking up the pen and creating your own signature.
And here's the cascade effect. Once you establish that unique, unfiltered connection, it inherently changes the way you view everything else.
You cannot hold a bespoke, dynamic view of the universe and still operate with a rigid, narrow view of your own life.
Exactly. It fundamentally alters the way you define your purpose. And surprisingly, the footage reveals a profound deconstruction of how we view our life's mission. He argues that you shouldn't be looking for just one answer.
Which is a massive departure from the standard modern self-help rhetoric. I mean, we are bombarded with this pressure to find our ikigai, our singular passion, our capitalized life purpose.
Yeah, everybody's looking for their one thing.
Robbins identifies this as a systemic, paralyzing mistake, the belief that you have one singular reason for existing on this planet.
He straight up calls it a myth. He says, we have lots of purposes. We have different purposes in each day.
Which is so freeing.
It is. He acknowledges that, yes, you might have an overriding macro directive like a desire to grow, to give, or to be an expression of the divine you can be proud of, but the daily operational reality of purpose is plural.
Right.
Your purpose at 9 a.m. today might be to help a specific friend who is in crisis. Your purpose at 2 p.m. might be to navigate a complex betrayal at work. Your purpose at 8 p.m. might be to figure out how to stop your toddler from crying.
If we look at the psychology of the modern workforce, the relief this multi-purpose framework provides is massive. The cultural obsession with finding the one true purpose is actually generating an epidemic of anxiety and decision paralysis, particularly in young adults.
100%. They think, if I take this accounting job, what if it's not my one true purpose? I'm wasting my life.
By reframing purpose as a daily, shifting series of action-oriented verbs, to love, to give, to solve this immediate problem in front of me, he drastically lowers the barrier to entry for living a meaningful life.
Yes.
Purpose is no longer a destination you arrive at. It is a tool you use to interact with whatever is directly in front of you.
I love that. Purpose as a verb, not a noun.
Yeah.
And he roots this fluid approach in a very specific principle. He quotes the biblical directive, seek first the kingdom, and then the rest shall come.
But he doesn't leave it as abstract theology.